Now, with no football being on, many people, most notably the BBC on Match of the Day on Saturday night, Gary Lineker, Ian Wright and Alan Shearer have had some really interesting programmes talking about the past, and indeed I've done some myself with John and Liam, which have been wonderful. And today I'm going to talk to John and Liam, and we're all going to talk about the dream we had as kids, to go to England, to play for the big clubs, and every Irish kid who ever played football, certainly most of them who were any good, always dreamt, I think, of going to England, going to one of the big clubs. And Liam and John both realised that ambition, and indeed I did myself. So I'm happy to welcome John and Liam to the stand. John, you were the first, of course, and you went to England, I think, around 1956, was it?
Yeah, I went to United for a month at 1955.
Yes.
Right, because Billy Bean, as you know, was the scout for Manchester United. He was actually friends with my father for years. He was the scout, and I'd been playing schoolboy football for a few years. And I think it was a way of connecting me with the club, because I think there were one or two other clubs interested in me.
Yes.
So they sent me over to Manchester at 55 when I was 14.
Yeah, for a kind of holiday, come have a look at the club type thing.
Yeah, it was starting the pre-season training, and as a kid, as you said,
yeah.
I was always a Manchester United supporter from the time I was a kid, because the great Jackie Carey played for Manchester United when they won the Cup in 1948.
Yeah.
So from a distance, I was following Manchester United. So it was a dream come true when my father told me that Manchester United wanted me to go over.
Yeah.
At that particular time. And as you know, it was the time of the Busby Babes. This was 1955, pre-season training.
They won the league that year, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah.
And I was obviously able to watch the practice matches, Eamon.
Yes.
Duncan Edwards and Tommy Taylor and David Pegg, all these great players that I only read about.
Liam Whelan would have been there as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah, Liam was there. Liam Whelan, Tommy Hamilton, a lad called Jackie Scott, looked after me.
Yes.
While I was there.
Yeah.
They were very kind to me. Tommy Hamilton, we know Liam was killed in the Munich area. Tommy Hamilton had to go back to Shamrock Rovers because he was called up for the army, and he was only in the A team at that particular time.
Yes.
Lovely man, still alive, and I wish him all the best if he's listening to the programme.
He had a great career with Rovers in the League of Ireland. He was a wonderful player. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first connection, going over to Manchester United. And it was a dream come true. And then eventually, the following year, in 1956, I went back on a permanent basis.
Yeah. Now, you were such a great schoolboy player, John. Your father ran a team, the Leprechauns. You played for them, and everyone in Dublin knew about you long before you were 14. Just because you were such a great player, you were always going to go away. You knew that, did you?
Well, I didn't know, Eamon. I mean, I was only playing football the same as everybody else. I didn't know. I wanted to go. I wanted to play for Manchester United,
right?
Because of Jackie Carey, as I said before. But I never thought about it at that particular time. I mean, it was a huge surprise to me when my father told me when I was 14 that Manchester United were taking me over. Unbelievable surprise.
Yeah.
At that particular time to do that,
Yeah. Liam, you come from a great footballing family. Your older brothers, Ray and Pat, went away to play, both of them, incidentally, for Millwall, I think, at different times. Now, you were a Manchester United fan as well, and you went, I think you would have gone maybe 10, 15 years after John. How soon did you start to really dream and aspire to going away to play? Who did you play for at school? It was Kevin's, wasn't it?
St. Kevin's up in Whitehall, yeah. Ellenfield Park, yeah. They were a relatively young club at the time. They started mid-50s. but they weren't one of the better clubs. One of the best clubs were either Home Farm or Stella Maris, best schoolboy clubs. And all my brothers, I was a bit of a surprise when I came along.
Yeah.
Because my brothers were 20 years older than me, 19 years older than me, and Frank, who was next to me, was 8 years older than me. So I was a bit of a surprise coming along when I did.
Yeah.
But I played for Kevin's because they were a new club right on my doorstep.
Yes.
And a bit like John, I was playing for a really good Kevin's team. We were winning a lot of things, and we knew that there was lads from Kevin's. There was a lad called Damien Ferguson.
Yes, I remember Damien.
He was about 4 or 5 years older than me, but he went to Man United as a schoolboy. So we saw him do it, and we had these dreams, that we were as you called them, dreams that we were going to get the call. You see.
Yes.
And I was doing quite well, and there was a bit of interest, and Billy Bean was still the Man United scout at the time, and went on for a long time being Man United scout. And a bit like you and John, he got to know me, and he kept saying, I'll get you over, don't worry, just be patient. So I kind of had it in my mind I was going to, at some stage, go,
Yes.
But the way it transpired for me, was Bill Darby, who became the Arsenal scout, was kind of on trial as an Arsenal scout, and they sent over a Welsh scout. Arsenal did, because Bill had said, "Look, Manchester United have the run of the place here." And they get all the best players to go to Old Trafford. So Gordon Clark, the chief scout at Arsenal at the time, said, "Well, this is interesting. I'll send somebody over to check this guy out." And Bill Darby met this Malwyn Roberts, who was a scout from North Wales, who Gordon Clark had thought was one of his better scouts.
Yes.
And Bill brought him to one of our matches and said, there's some good players in this Kevin's team. And that's how it happened for me. The next minute, 2 scouts were knocking on the door, and they were inviting me to Arsenal for a trial.
Yeah, and of course...
But at that time as well, though, Bunny Fulham was also a scout for Coventry.
Yeah.
Bunny had been a League of Ireland player. My brothers knew him. He was in and around the same age.
Yes.
And he was also a friend of the family, you see.
Yeah.
And he'd taken Jimmy Holmes over to Coventry when he was a kid.
Yes.
And Jimmy was doing well. And, Bunny they were the 2 scouts that were in and about the place, Billy Bean and Bunny Fulham.
Yeah. And Bunny... was a great character. He was a friend of my own father's because we lived opposite Tolka Park. Bunny was a great player for drums, and he used to kick lumps out of Liam Toohey, who was the great player for, Rovers had many great players and they had a great team, but Bunny was a character, a great character, really, God rest him, and he was very friendly with my father, but I knew him very well. But when he was trying to, and Coventry, which we should say, Liam, I think Jimmy Hill might have been the manager around that time, and they were.
Do you know who was manager? Eamon? It was Noel Cantwell.
Yeah, right. Now they were a first division club.
Yeah, and Noel Cantwell and Bunny, I think, knew one another.
Yeah.
And Bunny would be at a lot of my games, and he'd be saying hello to me and so forth, and he'd be saying, "I'll be sending you over soon." A bit like Billy B and be sending you over, but Arsenal got him first, you see. And Bunny thought he had a good chance of getting me,
Yes.
And in fact, when he heard that I was going to Arsenal, and Arsenal were keen to sign me when I was leaving school at 15, Bunny tried to bribe my mother with a washing machine.
No,
and very nearly succeeded, Eamon. Very nearly pulled it off.
I wasn't offered a washing machine, Liam.
I think.
Well, you see, I was going to ask you, John. You were going to Old Trafford when they had an abundance of young players, didn't you? Yeah.
Unbelievable. They had the pick of Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales at that time, Liam.
Yeah.
So when you first went over for that month, how did you travel? Did you go by airplane?
No.
No.
Funny. It's a funny story, Liam. Like Manchester United never threw the money around at all. I was sent over.
They didn't have to, did they? They didn't have to, John.
No. I would have gone anywhere. I was only 14. I went over on the Leinster or Munster boat.
Yeah.
To Liverpool.
To Liverpool, right? And my mother put a pound, well, I don't know where she got the pound from, a pound note stuck inside my pocket in case anything happened. And I never realised at the time when I was doing it, it was only afterwards. I had to get then from Liverpool, on from the boat to Lime Street, obviously from Lime Street to Manchester Central, where a man called Joe Armstrong was waiting to meet me. Now, I was only a young fella, and the only time I got a bit scared of it all was about 10 minutes coming into Manchester, when I thought, it just crossed my mind, I'd never met Joe Armstrong before. What's going to happen if he doesn't recognise me, and I don't recognise him? I'm going to be stuck in Manchester. I wouldn't know anybody, didn't know where to go. That was the only time I got scared. But I thought afterwards, why didn't they fly me over from Dublin to Manchester?
Oh, why wasn't there someone there at Liverpool off the boat to pick you up in a car and take you to Manchester?
I tell you,
but this was 55, Liam,
you know. It's crazy when you think we were just kids.
Absolutely.
My Eamon, I don't know. You're going to tell us what happened to you, but mine was a doddle compared to John's. Mine was a doddle compared to John's.
Yeah, well, I mean, you went. I think it was probably around 71, 72. Was it, Liam? Yeah.
I went 71,
71. Yeah. But
what year did you go?
I went in 1960, and the thing was that I was kind of iffy. Billy Behan was coming round. When I knew, we always knew when Billy Behan was at the matches as schoolboys. And I'd play.
Yeah, the word went around, didn't it?
Yes.
The word went around.
Yeah, and Billy was a quietly spoken man. He was a bookie who stood at the Dogs in Shelbourne Park and Harold's Cross, and he also worked for the Glass Bottle Company. Now, I was one of those players, like I was playing for Stella Maris. I was a good player, played for the Irish schoolboy team in the end, but I was fighting for that spot in the Irish schoolboy team with Paddy Mulligan, but I got it. Paddy was a more wing half type, but it was between the two of us. But anyway, Billy would come to the matches for a couple of years, really. Now, he could have been watching anyone. We had a good team. Home Farm and Stella were the best two teams of those years. But anyway, every time Billy walked in to Stella's ground, or if he was in the Phoenix Park, you'd know, wouldn't you? You'd get the vibe would be around.
The vibe, yeah, the word would go around, yeah.
So you were kind of aware of that. But my mother, he arrived at my house in Richmond Road, opposite Talca Park, the Christmas before I went away, when I was 14 and a half. And before the Irish schoolboy team had been picked or anything. And my mother was in on her own. And he said, Mrs. Dunphy, my name is Billy Behan. I'm a scout for Manchester United. And he presented her with a turkey and a bottle of sherry. Now, we'd never had a turkey. My dad used to have to go down on Christmas Eve and hopefully get a chicken. But anyway, it was the first turkey we seen. So when my father came home from work, God rest the two of them, she said, Paddy, there's a man after coming here and giving me a turkey. And he's talking about Manchester United. What's all that about? So my father said, well, he's a scout and he might want Eamon to go to Manchester. I mean, when my mother was horrified. And I know I'm going to come to John in a moment. Anyway, my mother was horrified. She hated him from that moment. But she said to me the next morning when we were walking up to school, she said, why are you going to England to play football? She said, there's loads of football here. And I said, well, it's Manchester United. And she was really disturbed. It was a very disturbing experience. And anyway, Billy was not a welcome visitor from that point onwards. But of course, I was thrilled beyond belief. John, your mother didn't like Billy either, did she?
Oh, she hated him. She hated. I was going away when I was 40. Well, I went for good for 14.
Yeah.
But Billy had a very strong connection with my father because Billy played for Manchester United at one time.
He was a goalkeeper. Yeah.
As a goalkeeper, and he was pally with my father before for a few years because he was in the football scene, as it were. You know, when it was smaller in those days. So he was sort of pally with Billy Bean before they ever came along. But I think Billy Bean came up to the house once.
Yes.
I don't think he ever came up again. And well, my mother wouldn't be getting onto him, but I know she hated him because. Yeah. Not because he was a bad man or anything, but he was taking her son away to Manchester. So that was it. I mean, you know, as far as I was concerned, I was like you and Liam. Yeah. I was only too delighted.
Yeah.
To be going to Manchester.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went. I'll just tell you quickly the story. Anyway, I got my schoolboy cap. And we drew with England in Talca Park, and I think we beat Wales in Cork. And anyway, the night of the game in Talca Park was lashing rain, but I knew at that stage I was going to Manchester, but I was only going for a 2-week trial. And there was 2 other guys going. Jim Keogh was a home farm player. He played in the Irish schoolboy team. It was just 2 years after the Munich air crash, and they were saying around town that Jim Keogh, who's a big, strong lad from Home Farm, was the new Duncan Edwards. And another lad called Hughie Curran, who was a character. Hughie was 2 years older than us, but Hughie was going as well. So the 3 of us were all going together. But after the match in Talca Park, I only lived across the road, and Bill Shankly was there around the dressing rooms in Talca. And he came up to me and he said, young man, come here. And I knew, he said, I'm Bill Shankly, I'm manager of Liverpool. And they were in the second division at the time. He said, I think you've got a great future in the game. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Shankly, I'm going to Manchester. And I walked away from him. And that was a big mistake, I think. But the point of the story really was, it was that informal. And it goes to the point about Billy being really having all the territory covered and getting players away as he did. But I went to Manchester. The first time they flew us. Now, I was going for a 2-week trial. So the 3 of us went to Dublin Airport, never been near a plane or an airport for that matter, and we went straight there. But we were in the airport in Manchester. We didn't know what to do. How do we get to Old Trafford? And who is this man, Joe Armstrong? Same guy. Well, we got there in the end, but it was very, very messy. And I just want to ask you, John, and then you, Liam, as well. I mean, John, you and I ended up in the same lodging house. Mrs. Burgess, tell me what you were told would happen to you. You'd be treated like a king and there'd be nothing to worry about, and what actually happened.
Yeah, I was with Mrs. Robb. I actually went away with Jackie Hennessy. Do you remember Jackie Hennessy?
I do, yeah. He was a fireman later on in life. Yeah. He played for Shells later.
He came back to Shells. We went together. He was in the schoolboy international team. The 2 of us were in the schoolboy international team when we went away. So we were in digs with Mrs. Robb in Stratford.
Yeah.
Aiming. But no, the promise was that the digs would be checked out, and somebody would go around every so often to see exactly how you were getting on.
Yeah.
Right? Never saw anybody, Eamon. No. Not a sinner. Not a sinner.
No.
And that was it. It was the survival of the fittest.
Yeah, and I mean, when you went there, John, in the mid-50s, they'd still have been on rations post-war. They used to have a blue ration book. Yeah. I'd say the grub wouldn't have been great.
No. And I have found with digs, I mean, they used to start off okay, but the longer you were there, the worse it got.
Yeah.
And I was in a position, actually, with my father. You knew my father quite well.
Yeah,
my father wanted me to be a good footballer, and he wanted me to learn a trade. So when I actually went to Manchester first, Eamon, at the first year I was there, I worked in an engineering factory in Altrincham.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I was up early every morning, and the grub wasn't great. But I think when you were in digs, Eamon, you were always going to be hungry.
Yeah.
You were always going to be hungry because it was. We were living with an Irish woman, actually. So they're out to make a few bob.
Yeah.
You know, they're not out there to be looking after you. So I found that as the longer it went, the dinners got less and less.
Yeah.
So luckily enough, we had a few bob to go to the fish and chipper in the evening time.
When you went, Liam, in '71, would it have been better?
Oh, so much better,
Really?
So much better, yeah, so much better. It was still a big deal leaving home at 15.
Yeah.
But we were on a plane. I went with a lad called Martin Cuff. I think he played for Villa up in Crumlin.
Yeah.
And we went. I'd been going to Arsenal since I was 13, you see.
Okay.
And I've been going on holidays and school holidays and things. At Christmas time, two brand new pairs of football boots would arrive in a parcel for me.
Yeah.
I got football boots every 6 months. They were keeping me sweet,
Yeah.
And when I went at 15, we were on a plane, and I knew where I was going. I'd already stayed in the digs. They were season ticket holders at Arsenal. They weren't, like John is saying, they weren't in it for the money,
No.
They were in it because they were big Arsenal fans.
Right.
And that's what Arsenal tried to do. And I think Arsenal gave them a couple of season tickets to look after the boys.
Yeah.
So it was, compared to what John is describing, mine was a doddle. There was a car to pick me up at Heathrow, take me to the digs, set me in, so forth.
Yeah.
And they didn't go around and check the digs. They didn't have to. The boys had stayed there before. They knew.
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs. Rowland, they were called.
Yeah.
They were smashing. And he was like another father to me for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, at an Arsenal match over at Stamford Bridge, he took a heart attack and died.
Oh, God,
so I had to move digs. But that's another story.
Yeah.
But compared to what John is describing, and maybe you'll tell us what happened to you, I went to a lovely home, great grub, only a few minutes walk from Highbury, and they settled me in brilliantly.
Yeah, well, we were taken, when we arrived at Old Trafford, we were taken by Joe Armstrong, who is a legendary figure in the Manchester United story. He was the scout, the chief, it's the so-called scout. He was in charge of all the scouts like Billy B and all around. And they had, as John said, they had the pick of the whole of the British Isles, post-Munich and pre-Munich. But we were taken to a place, and had been told, my mother had been given assurances, don't worry, this is the biggest club in the world, this is the greatest club in the world. So they took the three of us with our bags, the little bags, I think you could have put everything in one suitcase between the three of us, but they took us to a place just beside the ground, and we walked around the corner, and there's a woman who ran the place called Mrs. Burgess. And we went in to the backyard and then into a long room, which was a kitchenette, but it was quite long. And there was sitting at the table, there was 12 lorry drivers eating their lunch. And they were having sausage rolls and spam and awful stuff, and drinking big mugs of tea. And we looked at each other and we thought, holy God. Because the one thing Irish families would always have a decent bit of food, even if you were poor. And we sat down and we were waiting to meet Mrs. Burgess. And she said, there you are. Don't worry, I look after you and all of that. So we'd come home. We went off. We came home and we got our dinner. And our dinner was scrambled eggs. And that was it. Spam, scrambled eggs. Pretty rough living, because just around Old Trafford there is not exactly... then we moved up in the world. There was better digs. Actually, John was very kind to me and helped me, and we found better digs in the end. But it was rough. I mean, we were hanging out. George came, John, and did exactly what you did. He came a year after me. He went and worked in Trafford Park for 2 years as an office walla, in an office. And
what was the money then? What money were you getting? 2 jobs? Was United giving you some money and you getting some money as an apprentice in this engineering company, John?
Yeah, well, what happened there, Liam, was funny that you mentioned that. Financially at that stage, it was okay because they were paying the digs, they were sending £3 home to my mother, and I was earning $2.50 in the job.
Yeah.
Right? Which was good for the year. The problem was when I signed pro, I got less money.
Yeah.
Because
and they stopped paying your mother. And they stopped paying your mother, did they?
Oh yeah, and stopped paying the digs. Right, so I was, in those days it was £8 in the winter and £7 in the summer. So even with the £8, there was £1 tax on that. So you had £7. So there was £3 going home to my mother, £3 digs. So I was left with £1.
Yeah, I mean, we got £7 10 shillings. £4 was for the landlady. And I was supposed to send £2 home, which would have made a big difference. And that would have left me with £1 10 shillings. But unfortunately, I met Barry Fry.
Unfortunately for your mother.
Unfortunately for everybody. And betting shops had just opened. Gus Demi, who was a very famous Manchester bookmaker, the Betting Shop Act came in. And in 1960, the year I arrived in England, betting shops started to open. So we get our wages, me and Barry, on a Thursday. And by Friday night, it was all gone. And we were really rough. We were going to the dogs. He was a very bad influence on me. And
he said you were a bad influence on him.
No, I don't think anyone. But there was one other funny thing I'll tell you. That myself, Jim Keogh, and Hughie Curran went into the same digs. And Jim was a lovely, well brought up fella. Very clean, very stylish. He wore the best clothes, and he was a bit of a dandy, and he was lovely. And Hughie and me were a bit rough, and Hughie was dog rough. God rest him. He is alive, I think, but he was kind of rough and ready fella. He was 2 years older than us, and a great ladies' man. But anyway, one weekend, Jim had a wardrobe full of gear, and it was great. One weekend, Jim went home to Dublin. And he went after the match on a Saturday. So Saturday night, me and Hughie were going out. And Hughie had a bird he was after. And he didn't have anything to wear. So he went into Jim's wardrobe. And he got Jim's best suit. And he put it on. And off we trotted into town. And he got lipstick and every kind of stuff on the suit. Anyway, Jim came back on Monday morning. And he said, "What's happened to me suit?" And I said, Hughie wore it out on Saturday night. That was a big fight between the two boys. And we had to split up then and go into different digs. And as it happened, Jim never made it as a player, but he ended up working in a factory, believe it or not. It's rather sad, actually, when you think about people you were with who had bad experiences, as well as funny ones. But that's
I had my brothers in London, Eamon, which was great help. Eamon, who you played with.
I did, yes, yeah.
He lived over Lewisham / New Crossway.
Yes, that's Millwall territory.
Millwall, yeah. In fact, he took me a few times to Millwall to watch you playing. Yeah. When you were in that early Millwall team with Kitchener and
Harry Cripps.
The fullback name, Harry Cripps.
Harry, yeah.
Yeah. So he took me to a few games, and then Paddy was living in Chislehurst in Kent.
Yes.
And Ray had a pub down in Sevenoaks, all on the south side, Sevenoaks, Kent. Yeah. So I compared to you two, like I had it so much easier because they were there for me. Eamon used to come to the youth games, and then I'd go off with him, or we'd go down and see Ray to Sevenoaks and stay the weekend with him, So compared to you guys, I had it easy.
How did you find England, Liam? Just as in terms of the people and the life compared to Ireland. For example, when did you stop going to Mass?
Pretty much straight away.
John, when did you stop?
I kept going, Eamon.
Yeah, I kept going until I was 21, actually. And did you keep going to confession?
Yeah.
You did you? Did you have anything to confess?
Well, nothing serious, I don't think. Anyway, I was a good Catholic boy for a few years. But you talk about going to see. When I worked in the factory, Eamon, I worked there for 12 months.
Yeah.
Right, in the engineering factory, and I found the English lads brilliant.
Yes.
They were absolutely great. I mean, I still remember Alan Cook. Al Brown. I remember the names. They were terrific lads and looked after me really well.
Yeah.
They took me out to matches and that because I was on my own, literally on my own there. But I found them great. And you talk about at that time, as you say, there was still rationing in England at that time.
Yes.
Food-wise. And when I came home, I used to bring. My mother used to give me a lot of stuff to bring over to these lads, and one of them was tinned salmon.
Yeah.
They couldn't get tinned salmon in England.
No, it'd be a rarity.
And it was a huge treat. A huge treat for them. I mean, this was 1956.
Yeah.
And they still had rationing there. But I found from day one, I found the English lads great.
Yeah.
And the story I have to tell about them as well. I mean, when I went there, I was 15 with a broad Dublin accent.
Yeah.
And they had a Manchester accent.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand a word they said.
Yeah.
And they couldn't understand a word I said.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought, how am I going to get on in this country?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
I was like a foreign accent. And they were speaking among themselves. They couldn't understand me at all. But luckily enough, we got used to each other.
That happened exactly to me as well, John. When I went into Arsenal, there was a Scots fella there who I'll never forget him, called Drew Rutherford. And he was from around Glasgow or somewhere. And he started speaking to me. And I just kept saying, pardon? Pardon. And in the end, I think he told me to feck off.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what he was saying. And even the guy picking me up to take me from the airport, Ernie Collett, he was one of the scouts. And Ernie was a Londoner. And he was talking to me. I didn't understand what he was saying. I didn't understand. And just like you're saying to yourself, how am I going to get over this,
Yeah.
I just remembered, sorry, there's a punchline to the story about Jim Keogh and the suit and Huey that I forgot. You know that little cafe, John, on the bridge, just going over to Old Trafford? There used to be a cafe there. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what really happened, sorry, Liam, I usually tell my stories well, but this one, what happened was Jim went home to Dublin for the weekend. And Huey was wearing his suit all week, all weekend. And Huey wore the suit into training on Monday morning. And we were in the cafe, myself and Huey and Barry Fry and a few. And he had Jim's suit on. And Jim arrived in the cafe. And he saw Huey wearing his suit. And it didn't dawn on him for a while. He kept looking at Huey. And he said, hold on a minute. Is that my fucking suit? And Huey said, no. So there was a mill. There was a mill in the cafe almost. It's very funny. Sorry Liam, I want to ask you and John the same question. I'll ask it John first because you referred to it there earlier. When you arrived at Old Trafford, John, and all of those great players, Liam Whelan, and so many great players, Duncan Edwards.
Yeah.
And did you feel, Jesus, am I going to make it here? Because, I mean, you were great as a schoolboy and you were always, you always seemed destined for greatness. Did you ever feel and wonder, this is, or did you just play it by ear?
No, I was lost, Eamon.
Really?
I was lost.
Really? Yeah.
Because you had all these great players, as you say. I was quite a shy lad. And there was a Duncan Edwards, but it went right down, Eamon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all the great schoolboys.
There was schoolboy international, schoolboy, and there was no organised training.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you went out on the track. The training was you went out on the track and you did that for an hour. There was no real supervision. And then they got a couple of balls out and you picked two teams and you went around the back. Right?
Yeah.
Now there was Duncan Edwards and Tommy Taylor and these guys. I mean, I was scared to run past them on the track around the ground. I was lost. I was absolutely lost.
Right.
There was no organised training, and I was out of me, in my depth playing in these matches.
Yeah.
I was only 15, 16 at the time.
Yeah.
When this was happening, and I was just lost.
And did it cause you to wonder? How am I going to get? This is a long, a long road I'm on now.
Yeah, definitely. Because what happened was that when the Jimmy Murphy said it's not a good idea to be working, so they took me out of the factory to train, and it was before I was even 17. So the likes of Jack Hensley were on the ground staff. I would have been fair to go on the ground staff, but I was in training with all these guys, Eamon. So I was lost, and I was lost up to the Munich air disaster, to be quite honest, because that was still happening then.
Yeah.
And then after the Munich air disaster, you see, they got Jack Crompton. Jack Crompton had been a goalkeeper for Manchester United, who had gone to Luton, right? So when the Munich disaster happened, they brought Jack Crompton back to be the trainer. Right. And it was a blessing for me. Jack organised the training in the group. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I was part of a group training. You know, and there was Bill Foulkes. Bill wasn't the best guy in the world, you know. And he was a bit of a bully, like, and that. But with Jack Crompton after Munich, they used to have this training in a group, and Jack had an expression for it, you know, running on the spot. Simon.
Yeah.
Now I was only a kid; I didn't know what was on, but I was running on. He said, "Run on the spot," and when he said that, and he said, "Go," I ran forward.
Yeah.
And who did I run into? Bill Foulkes. He said, "You stupid little Irish shit."
Yeah.
And I was terrified. But at least it was organised training.
Yes, yeah.
After the Munich air disaster, and I sort of picked up from that. Yes. But before that, as you say, I was lost, Eamon. I was really lost. Right. Before with the way it was before the Munich air disaster.
Yeah, and Bill Foulkes had been a minor. He was a big centre half, and I'm sure Manchester United people who know their stuff will know that Bill Foulkes went on to have a great career for Manchester United, and sadly he died rather young. Liam, one of the things about that experience of going over there at 15 is you go from being a star for Kevin's, or in John's case, being a star all over Dublin. I mean, certainly he was playing for Stella Maris. He was the best schoolboy footballer in the country. You must have been one of the best of them. I was playing for the Irish schoolboy team. And you go over, and then, going to a club like Arsenal. Did you find it difficult, intimidating? Did you ever have
it? Definitely, definitely. Because you're all competing to be, to get up the next rung, which would be from the youth team to the reserves. Get a place in the youth team to begin with, then to get into the reserves, and then hopefully from the reserves move on to the first team. But I was always confident. I had a bit of a wobble at the first Christmas. I went home and I didn't know whether I wanted to go back, and I stayed at home and I said, I'm not too sure I wanted to go. I want to go back. Yeah, and I stayed probably an extra couple of weeks, and Arsenal were good. They just said, take your time, think about it. And then when I came back, I got a bit fed up at home because I missed the training, I missed playing football, or full-time football. So when I went back then, I just got my head down and went on from there. But Arsenal just won the double when I joined them.
Yeah.
So they had a great team.
Yeah.
Like John would know them very well. They were competing for the league. I know when Arsenal won the double, I think Leeds missed out on goal difference or something like that. So they had a lot of good players, but things changed quickly. The team broke up quickly. But there was, and as John said, the English lads, they were always very good to me as well. I remember John Radford, Geordie Armstrong, they'd pick me up in their cars and take me to training and things like that.
Yeah.
They were smashing lads. Sammy Nelson was a great friend of mine. Sammy was like he was like understudy to Bob McNabb. Bob McNabb was the left back. And Sam, I remember when in my first few months there, Sammy came up to me and he said, "Are you Irish?" In his Northern Ireland accent. "Are you Irish?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Dublin." He said, "What's your name?" And I said, Liam Brady. He said, Fenian bastard.
Yeah.
But he was joking, Yeah. And Sammy and I became great friends as things moved on.
Can you remember your first wage packet, Liam? How much was in it?
It was about £6, I think, £6 a week as an apprentice.
Wow. That wouldn't go far in London, would it?
Well, they paid the digs.
Right,
They always paid the digs. They paid the digs till you became a pro. And once you were a pro, you had to pay your own digs,
Yeah.
And then when I turned pro, I think I got about £40 a week, so tenner for the landlady, and you had £30 in your pocket,
Yes.
And I always had my brothers there. If I was any short, they would always weigh in,
Yeah.
So compared to you guys, I had it easy. But I was going to ask John, how old were you when you made your debut, John? When you got into the first team?
I was 18, Liam, because we had the Munich Disaster in 58, and I made my debut, and I was 17 then. I made my debut in 59. I was 18 when I made my debut. So after the Munich air disaster, Liam, I'd settled in. I'd settled in by then with the training and all that. I got into the reserve, into the second team immediately after, because everybody was pushed forward. Yeah, and then I really came on. Came on in the season after that, Liam, when I was playing regularly in the reserve team at Manchester, which was very, very good, with Mark Pearce and Alec Dawson, and we were top. We won the Central League that year, and then I made my debut in 59. Yeah, when I was 18.
Okay, I'd like to ask both of you a question now, and it's this. I'll start with you, Liam. Knowing if you were living in Dublin today and you had a young son who was really good at football and played for Ireland schoolboys, and they came looking for them, as they do, and you know better than anyone because you ran the Arsenal youth system for 14 or 15 years. Would you, knowing all the things you know, would you be a concerned parent if your son was going to England at the age of 15?
No, not at all. No.
Right.
The structures and the support are hugely better than they were in our day, and particularly in your day. You know, your education's looked after. You carry on your education till you're 18. The houses you live in are, run by people who are interested in the club, and the club look after them to look after the boys. It depends on your character as well. I mean, if you want to get into trouble, you'll get into trouble, won't you? There's plenty of lads I know who blew their careers by, being taking their eye off the ball and not being professional enough and so forth. So I wouldn't be concerned at all, If my son was really good academically, you'd have more to think about, I think. But if he had this dream that we all had, that he wanted to be a player, you can't possibly stop them, can you?
No, you can't. Just to you knew, and you know what the going rate is now, and we read stories about young kids and their parents getting jobs. I mean, there's supposed to be a young Irish lad who went to Barcelona when he was 9 a few years ago, and his parents were taken there. They've got, I know that happened to Lionel Messi when Barcelona wanted him. You hear stories about vast amounts of money, not a turkey or a washing machine. What is the going rate now, Liam?
Well, if you're the best player in Dublin now, you can expect a professional contract of probably $250,000 a year when you turn 17.
Really? And that's guaranteed?
Yeah, that'll be guaranteed as you sign your, what are they called? They're called scholarships now. The same thing as an apprenticeship,
Right.
You sign your scholarship forms. As soon as you're 17, you'll get, a professional. They all won't get that kind of money, but if you're the best player and other clubs are seeking your signature, you'll be in and around $250,000 as a 17-year-old.
Right.
And the dad will probably have a car and a house. They won't buy him a house, but they let them live in a house.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players who bring their parents with them now, and the club don't have a problem with them, and they'll get the father a job, and they'll get they'll get them a very nice place to live in. That's the kind of stuff that's going on now.
Yeah, so that's accelerated dramatically, and because of the scarcity, burst of talent, and the competitiveness now. Because when we began remembering 40 minutes ago, we're talking about Billy Bean and Bunny Fulham. But now,
yeah. But if you want to get Cesc Fabregas to leave Barcelona at 16, you've got to have all these things lined up for him, Eamon.
Right, John.
Yeah.
Just to go back to you, if Chris or Michael, your sons, had wanted to go to if I rephrase this question slightly from the one I asked Liam, to the world that you and I went into with the greatest, the most famous club in the world at that time, Manchester United, with all the assurances we were given, would you be concerned, or would you say go for it?
Well, times have changed, Eamon. Now you're going back to our day.
I'm going back to our day, yes.
Well, it's not a decision you have to make. I mean, if they were as keen to go to England as I was, then I certainly wouldn't stop them.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays it's not even a decision, because the lads are well looked after. Education is Liam knows better than we do. They've got hostels now to put the kids in. There's protection. They're well looked after. There's education available, Eamon, as well by the clubs, if you want to go. Yeah. And also the financial situation would have to come into it. Yeah. I mean, if you have a kid who's really good and as Liam said, are going to be offered, which they are today, guaranteed contracts which are 17.
Yes.
At the money, at big money.
Yeah, it's life-changing.
You couldn't refuse that, Em. You wouldn't even have to think about it. You'd have to say, okay, off you go.
Yeah.
I think generally speaking, Eamon, what's happening now is good for the kids and it's good for the parents in many ways for the financial reasons.
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually good for the young kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and Liam knows and I know when I went away at 15, we all went away at 15, you had to work and make yourself really, really good to be signed pro.
Yeah. Well,
that was the big thing. If you didn't sign pro, you were on the scrap heap.
Yeah.
So there was an incentive there. Yeah. To really work at it and to make sure that you're signed pro. Whereas the kids today, as Liam says, they're guaranteed contracts at 17.
Yes.
Whether they're wasting their time or not in those 2 years, Eamon.
Yeah.
Like that incentive that we had to really work at it and to make sure you're signed pro. And many, not all young lads, but certainly there's quite a few, would be lost.
Yeah, just to go back to my own situation, the three of us who went away that morning, it was the 1st of August, 1960, we all went away. Jim Keogh didn't make it, and Jim was a very, very nice fellow indeed. I'm not sure if he's alive, actually, but he was a very nice fellow. He didn't get a professional contract when he was 17, and he was working in a factory. Very shortly afterwards, I got on a bus one day in Manchester, and he was sitting there in his factory overalls, which was quite a shock to me. Hughie went on, had a journeyman career. He played for Wolves. He played in Scotland. He played Scottish Premier League football, as our First Division football, as it was at the time, and I think he went on to play for Scotland and he played for Norwich as well. And in my own case, I was there on a 2-week trial, and it just shows you how tenuous this life can be sometimes. A 2-week trial, there was guys who, all the great Scottish schoolboys, English, there was a fella called Ray Hewitt who'd scored 170 goals in schoolboy football in England. He was just a goal machine who never made it at all. Barry Fry was there, of course. But my trial came down to this. One day, out of the blue, where I'd about 3 or 4 days left before I was going home, Matt Busby arrived on the training ground, and it was in the afternoon, and 2 sides were picked, and I played out of my skin. I knew Busby was watching. It made me nervous, but somehow in that 40, and they took me off at half time, and Jimmy Murphy came over to me, and you know that place in Chorlton where the training ground was, John. And I was gutted. I thought I'd blown it. And Jimmy Murphy said, nothing to worry about, son. You'll be coming back. So in that 45 minutes, I changed my life very dramatically. And thank God, I believe, for the better. But it's funny how tenuous these things can be at times, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. If you don't make it 17 in those days, I mean, you were on the scrap heap.
No, but at 40, maybe not 45 minutes, 30 minutes. Suppose you was watching, saw something you liked.
No, but I'm talking about generally.
Oh, yeah,
players who could be, you got a lucky break in that particular way. But there's lots of lads who some did come back from being released and made it. But Not very many, Eamon.
No. It's
And Eamon, tell us what happened to you then as it went. How long did you stay at Old Trafford?
I stayed. And when I was 17, I was a good youth player, Liam. I stayed. Signed a contract at 17 because that was the biggest. John says the big objective.
Yeah, that was the big target, wasn't it? To get yourself a pro contract.
Got myself a pro contract and a blazer. And my problem was I smoked. I didn't get any other upper body strength. Didn't really look after myself. And I had enough ability to be a player, but I didn't have the physique. But I didn't leave there until I was there for 5 years. And in the end, I had to ask to go. But I was never going to...
Did you get a game in the first team?
I was 12th man before they had subs. I was 12th man once at Notts Forest, but you didn't get changed. I wasn't good enough to play in the first team. I would have had the technical ability, but I just wasn't good enough. But I was lucky, Liam, and
you went on to have a fine career, yeah.
Yeah, well, some kind of career, but it's better than what I might have ended up doing if I'd had to come home with no skill set, work in a factory or something, which can be a grand life, and there's lots of fantastic people doing it. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, and it's been totally fascinating talking to both of you, and especially to you, Liam, because to sort of measure the gap between what John experienced and you experienced 16 or 17 years later. Things did change, and they've gone on changing for the better, haven't they, Liam?
Yeah, but John is absolutely right. I'm not too sure the players are getting better. I'm thinking all these guarantees that they have, I would agree wholeheartedly with John. They take their eye off the ball. They think they've made it already, and they don't train on. And that's why a lot of them, are big names. They think they're big names when they're 15, and then they don't have the careers that they should have had. So that's the downside to it, Eamon. But they are better looked after without any doubt. And and me compared to you two, I was in paradise, wasn't I?
You were, yeah. John and Liam, I can't tell you how grateful I am to you for sharing those memories with us, and I hope the listeners enjoyed that. Every word of it is true, and there's many, many more things that are true that we maybe talk about another time. I'd love to thank John and Liam, two great players, of course, went on to be great players, and two great football minds and analysts. Thank you, John, Liam.